Hi guys, I'm Aussie Villain. I do daily Football Manager content, and today we're going to be looking at transfers, more specifically how to structure a transfer deal. If you're not already, make sure you do subscribe, of course. But let's start and get straight into things here with the transfers in the transfer screen here. Now, the first thing to be aware of is that you can change the budgets you have between transfer budget, the actual amount you have to spend on players, and the wages that you can offer as well. So you are free to scroll. Obviously, if you take from one, it gives to the other, so you're not going to, it's going to sort of be a give or take situation, but it is an option that you can do if you find yourselves a little bit short of getting a transfer done, and it will often give you a chance to adjust the budget when the transfer is going to go through, but that's further down the line than where we are right now. So let's start by finding a player that we want to sign. Now, if we go to my short list here, and I did do a scouting tutorial, how to set up a scouting network. So if you haven't watched that yet, it's the previous video, so make sure you go back and watch that. This defender, I very, very much would like to sign him from Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. So let's go and see if we can make a bid. You can see there what they're offering, or what they think they're offering, or what he's valued at, I should say. Now, you do want to, you go here to ask the agent about availability. This is a good idea to get an idea of if it's even feasible to get a deal done. So we can see here that they believe that Dinamo would want somewhere between 8.4 and 13 million to get a deal done, and then we can see his wage demands, and that's going to be sort of offering contracts, which will be the next video at the end of this one. So yeah, we'll agree with that. That seems all absolutely fine, and we can now go and make a bid knowing that there's a good chance we're going to be able to get this deal done. So let's start. We want to try and obviously work this in our favor. So we want to try and keep the fee as low as we can. So let's start at the lower end of the spectrum, but instead we don't want to pay it up front in case he's a flop. So what we want to try and do is even lowball them. So let's say 7.5 million. Now we know they want up to say 13. So a way to do this, there's ways to add to the transfer fee afterwards. So you can do installments. So you could pay one installment every 6 months, all the way down to 6 installments every 6 months, and then same thing for 12 monthly, so over 3 years. And what this basically does is it breaks the transfer fee up so over those years, obviously. So instead of paying, so we could do say 6 of let's say $1 million. So what we're actually going to be doing is paying £1 million, but over the course of six months period. So 167,000 each 6 months. So I mean, if it's that's going to doesn't make too much of a difference. But let's say if we were to do 5 million, then over the next 3 seasons we would be paying, would that be 1.6 million every season, or 833,000 every 6 months. So if you don't have the budget now to buy a player, this is a good way to do it. Of course, what you're doing is you're then taking money out of future transfer budgets. It is going to affect you moving forward. But if you need a player now, and sometimes you do, that is a good way to do that. Now, the other clauses that we have here, there is a loan back length, or can be recalled from loan back. You can see that's not an option for us. I don't, to be honest, know why it's blanked out sometimes, and sometimes why it's not. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but if you want to loan them back, I don't know if it's an age thing, or if maybe the club doesn't want to loan them back, it could come down to as simple as that. But yeah, that's a good way. If you are a bigger club, one of a big Premier League team, and you're signing a youngster, if you loan them back to their parent team, if it's an option for you, especially if they're already a first team player at their parent club, it's a good way to make sure that they're going to keep developing, playing first team football, rather than sign them, either have them in your reserves or sign them and then having to try and loan them out again. It just depends on what your preference is on that front. There is an argument to say get them into the country. They can learn the language if they need to. But like I say, the payoff to that is that then you have to try and find them football so they develop. But if you have better training facilities, it may or may not work out for you. But that's something that you'll have to just figure out at the time, depending on the player as well. Now, transfer date is something else that's worth looking at here. Now, you can sign next available. Typically, that's what you're going to want, or at the end of the season. The reason you'd probably want to do end of the season is, say, if you have a very limited budget, you have a superstar striker or whatever position that is leaving at the end of the season, whether that be on a free transfer or going somewhere else. You may not want this player coming in until they've left, so that would be how you would wait till the end of the season as well. If you have leagues, it's maybe not so much of a deal in say the Premier League here, but salary cap league. Salary cap leagues like MLS, like the A-League in Australia, in that situation, you may want them to come at the end of the season so that there's space under the salary cap. But as I say, it's not too much of a big deal in a non-salary cap league unless you yourself are sort of right at a budget limit. Now, the other clauses you can add in here, percentage of next sale and a percentage of next sale. You always, if you are the selling team, you always want to try and add these in, especially if you're a smaller team and say you're a Scottish team, say let's say Hibs for just the top of my head, and you're selling a player to say a mid-table Premier League team like Wolves, and you think this player has the potential to then go on again and go to sort of one of the big Champions League European giants, what you would want to do is you always want to add percentage as opposed to a percentage of the profit. The reason for that, so say we're again, hypothetically here, the selling team, we sell a player for 7.5, he then gets sold on for 10 million. If you have say 50%, which is the highest you can go, if you have a 50% of the profit is 2.5 million, so you're going to get 1.25 million. But if you've got a percentage of the sale as opposed to the profit of the sale, you'll get 5 million. So if you have the 50%. So if you are the selling club, you want this as high as possible, particularly for young players that you think are going to go on for a bigger fee somewhere else. If you are, in this case, like us, the selling club, the buying club, then you don't want that. If we're selling this player on for a profit, we've developed and we want to keep the profit for ourselves. Now, if you don't want it to even become an option, if you click on it and then go remove and exclude, then that's off the table when it comes to negotiating. And it's important to do that because sometimes what will happen, particularly teams like Dinamo Zagreb, they're bastards for it, to be honest. They'll add it in there and they'll say, this is staying. You can negotiate the amount, but there's going to be an add-on for this. So yeah, if you click on it, remove and exclude, then it's off the table. Now, buyback price, not again a big deal if you are the buying team like we are. Typically the selling team is not going to ask for it. But if you are one of the big European clubs and you have someone you're not sure if they're going to develop or not, they're not really playing with you, and so you don't know if they're not really developing, but there's still might be something there. If you add a buyback price, then you can buy them back for that price, and you can see there you can have a start and expiry date of when that clause is active. Typically, no, if you don't have a start, I mean, I'm assuming the default start date just means it'll start straight away as opposed to a date in the future. Particularly if there's no expiry date. If they do develop, then you can buy them back, and it's happened. It's Spain. It seems to happen quite a bit. But yeah, it is something that if you're not sure about a player, that's a good thing to add in there. But if we're buying a player, then really we don't want it there because we don't want them to have an option to buy back for a fee that we're not in complete control of. So that is there. Now, selling team wage contribution. Now this is so basically, if we were to buy with this on, it means that Dinamo would pay, whatever the amount of the weekly wage is. Now, we don't need that. Where this can be useful is if you're buying a player, say you are Burnley, you are buying someone from Manchester United that they just don't want anymore, but they're on 100 grand a week because they play for Manchester United. Of course they are. You can't afford that, so what you can do is you can ask Manchester United to pay whatever the amount is. Now, he's on a relatively low wage at Dinamo right now, so it's not sort of a good example for a high wage, but you might be able to ask them to pay 50 grand a week. You can pay the next 50. The player makes the same money. You're only playing. You're saving 50 grand a week. United's saving 50 grand a week, and everybody's more or less happy. What you may find with this is, if you are asking the team to pay some of the wage, they'll want a bigger transfer fee up front. So it's not always perfect, but you might have a situation where you have a little bit of extra money in the transfer budget, but you don't have enough money in the transfer or the wage budget or the transfer budget to move it into wages to get the deal done. And this is where seeing what the player would want by asking his agent can be useful, because you can ask, would this guy be interested in coming, and what would his wage demands be? And if his wage demands are 70 grand a week, your max wage you can pay is 50. Just again, plucking numbers. Then you can ask the selling team to pay 20 grand a week of his wages, and then between the two, he'll get his 70 grand a week, and you'll be able to get the deal done. Now, as I said, in this situation, we don't need them to do that, and usually it's not worth doing. It's only if in a situation where you're trying to sign a player that you're not going to be able to afford wages without it, or the vice versa, you're the big club, you just want to get a player out. And I've had this before, either they're not registered in the squad, they're kicking off about something. If you just want to get them out, sometimes you just have to suck it up, pay some of their wages, and get them out the door. Now, next up, it is a Ranger friendly. Personally, I don't like this. because you can arrange a friendly anyway. But what it basically means, I should explain what it means before I say I don't like it. So in this situation, we would go and play a friendly at Dinamo Zagreb's home ground in pre-season typically, and they would get to keep. We would go for free, and they would get to keep all the profits. So if you have a big stadium and you're selling it, to someone like, again, one of the big European giants, it might be worth it. It might add a couple of million on. And you know what, if you're selling, it might, maybe it's worth just adding it on and seeing what happens. But if you have a small stadium, then the amount that you're going to get is negligible. It's probably one of these clauses. It's worth trying to add it in because you will get a little bit of money if it does come off. But I wouldn't add it in at the expense of the transfer fee. As long as you're getting the money you want up front, I wouldn't let them take money off of it. But if you can add it in, it doesn't take any money off here, why not? It is going to get you more money longer term. It's not something I've typically used, actually. Maybe I've sort of talked myself into that being a good idea. And sell player first. Now, this is really, really useful if you're in a situation, particularly towards the end of a transfer window. So say, we'll use Coutinho as an example. This is my series with Aston Villa. Say that Liverpool is interested in Coutinho because they want to get him back. And I'm not sure if he's going to go or not. He has a release fee, because it would be a really good example of a situation where they may not go, they might go. But what you don't want is to sign Coutinho and another player that plays in his position. But equally, you don't want to lose Coutinho, then have nobody. So you would add this in to say, we'll sell player first. So if Coutinho leaves, then this transfer will go through. If Coutinho doesn't leave, then deal's off, basically. And so it's really, really good to make sure that you have your bases covered. Like I say, particularly useful towards the end of a transfer window. If there's interest in a player that it has a release fee, that's where this can be really, really useful. If you are selling a player to somewhere else, typically you don't really want this in there because you want to know if that player is leaving or not. The only reason you might leave it in is if it's a situation where it doesn't really matter to you if he stays or goes. So if it's a difference between them being interested in the transfer or not, then you might want to leave it in. But ideally, you wouldn't really want it in there. So that is everything that's there. Now, additional fees here. We got to installments and we kind of stopped, didn't we? After league appearances. Now, this is one that I like to add in. Say 50 games, and we will add in, we'll pay you 2.5. The good thing about this is that, if it's a player that you don't think you're going to want for too long, you can have this up at a really, 7.5 million. If they play 49 games and then you sell them, you don't have to pay this, but you'll obviously get to sell them on. So if it's a player that you're looking at having for maybe a season or two and then moving on anyway, it might be a good sneaky way to get this initial fee down and then be able to sell him on and make the extra money that he's worth from you developing him for a couple of years, but not having to pay the full transfer fee. The downside to having this number too big is that if you do like him and they end up staying, or you have to play them more than you thought because there's injuries or something along those lines, you are going to have to either not play them or you're going to have to pay the fee. So you don't want to make it too big, but it's a good one. I like it because if they turn out to be a bit of a flop, then you don't have to go and pay the extra money. You've saved yourself a little bit of cash. Next up, you've got per league appearance. Now, this is not something I particularly like to use. Sometimes a club will request it over 10 games. So for each one of those 10 games, you pay $1,000. It's an option. I prefer to use just a total league appearances. Now, it's important that it's appearances, it's not starts. So if they come off the bench, that counts as one. So if you are going to add per league appearance, maybe don't bring the guy on, for the last 10 minutes of a game if you're going to have to pay someone 130 grand if you don't have to. So that's something to be aware of as an option. After international appearances, this will pop up from time to time. It's a good one if you're the selling team. Add in 5 after a game, get a little bit of extra money. I don't like adding it in when I'm the buying team because I'm not in control of if they get called up to the international team or not. I like to be in control of what's happening with when money's going to go out of the transfer budget. But if it's something where you've maxed out with your fee here and you need a little bit more money to sweeten the deal, then it is an option that you can add in. And again, you can add as many as you want in terms of a fee, but yeah, just it's an option that can help lower the initial fee. Minimum league goals. This is one I like, particularly for defenders because they're unlikely to get 50 goals. It's a good one for strikers as well because I always does anybody because I figure if they're scoring goals then they're worth it, and if they're not, then again it's taking money off the initial fee here, and you'll probably want to sell them on before they get to that amount anyway, because if they're not scoring goals and they're supposed to, then they're a busted signing, aren't they? Players to exchange. I don't like this again. The reason I don't like this is because if you have your end of the deal sort of tied up, contract agreed, everything, that's fantastic. If the player going the other way, though, bails out of the deal, then the whole thing's off. You've got to start again. So it's, again, if you're desperate, it might be a way to get something done. The only way I'd recommend even using it is that if you know a player is interested in going to that club and you want a player from their club, then you might be able to come to some sort of arrangement. But as a way to just randomly throw a player in and say go, I wouldn't recommend it because the whole deal can go up in smoke just because your player doesn't want to go to the other team. And the final one here is, it's sort of a several ones here, but bonuses after competition achievements. Now, every competition that you are in, it'll have it listed there and what you can do in order to, in order to pay the bonus out. Good ones are if you are particularly a team, say a championship team, you can pay your money upon promotion. So sort of, or in this situation with Villa, we've qualified for the Champions League, so you're going to get that money coming in. So then pay money out once you've got the prize. You know what I mean? So you've got the prize money coming in, then pay out a bigger fee. Avoiding relegation. If you're a team that is just been promoted perhaps and your board objective is to avoid relegation or fight bravely against relegation, it might be worth your while throwing in, if we happen to avoid relegation, I'll pay you this extra money. If not, we're going to be relegated. We're not going to have the Premier League money, so then you don't get it, basically. So that's a good way, again, a good thing to add. I usually like adding either qualification for the Champions League or winning the league. Will give you a little bit of cash. There can be a minimum game requirement. I don't usually add it in, but if you want to add that in, it makes it a little bit more difficult for the team to actually get the money, and you can have it active for so many seasons. Typically, I just leave it as is. So let's say £1 million for that, and well, there's the other things there: winning cups and Champions League itself, and. I've had it. You had the bonuses for winning the Champions League, and I think I've operated at a loss because just all the bonuses that I pay out to, all the extra fees that get paid out to clubs. So you've got to be a little bit careful adding on things like winning the Champions League, because it might take you 5 or 6 seasons to get there, and you've got 5 or 6, in my case, 5 or 6 seasons worth of players with £1 million add-ons, and you almost bankrupt the club despite winning it. But let's do it for fun and see what they say about this. So we'll suggest those terms. See, they want the money up front, so let's say, we did lowball them a little bit, so let's go back to the 8.5, 3 million, everything else there is the same, and see if we can get ourselves somewhere in the middle here. So we're getting closer. So let's say 9 million with the 3.6, total amount of 17 million, and they're okay with 9 million up front, so we're sort of playing around with this amount now. I didn't really want that on there, did I? But we'll add the 10 games. And if you want to lock something in, so say your transfer budget is 9 million and you cannot go above that as a fee, making that go red clicks it in. If it's orange, it means that they can negotiate to a point. Usually when they come back, they'll come back with that. But if you just red, lock it in, so that means that everything... That's the most you're going to pay as a transfer fee, and everything else down here, the future payments, are what we're negotiating. So that can be useful as well, just to be like, this is it. So there we go. We've got 9 million up front, all the other add-ons there up to 19.5, and we can finalize that deal. So there we go. Those are your options to structure a transfer deal. If you found that useful, make sure you hit thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and join me as I look to take the next step towards signing a player in negotiating a contract. Take care.